Well, Republicans in the state of Michigan just received massive news for the 2026 Michigan Senate election and the 2026 governor election in Michigan. Tudor Dixon, a prominent conservative from the state of Michigan, has announced that she will not be running in either race. Now, we know on the gubernatorial side, John James, who is a rising star in the Republican Party, is running for governor, positioning himself as Michigan's strongest Republican tender to win with a broad coalition of support. You jump over to the senatorial side. Former Congressman Mike Rogers appears to be consolidating support around his candidacy in the 2026 Senate election. Now, we know in 2024 he was the nominee, lost to Alyssa Slotkin by roughly 19,000 votes in 2024. But these developments in the 2026 Senate election and governor's election give Republicans a huge advantage that she is not in this race. So let's dive into what exactly this means. Now, we all know that Tudor Dixon was the 2022 Republican gubernatorial nominee. She faced off against popular incumbent governor Gretchen Whitmer from the state of Michigan. Now, Dixon, who lost to Governor Gretchen Whitmer by roughly 9 points, cited her focus on promoting President Trump's, quote, America First policies instead of running. Kind of odd, but okay. Now, her decision clears the field for Republicans, avoiding a divisive primary. Now, we know on the senatorial side, we know that support seems to be consolidating much more around former Republican nominee Mike Rogers. Right now, Bill Huizenga, the U.S. representative from Michigan's 4th Congressional District, apparently will announce sometime in July that he is running. But as of right now, Mike Rogers is the only one. President Donald Trump reportedly endorsed Bill Huizenga in his re-election bid for Michigan's 4th Congressional District. So obviously between these two, but really support is starting to coalesce behind Mike Rogers in the Senate race. Now, on the gubernatorial side, it's a much different picture for the Republicans. You have a lot of Republicans in this race. John James, who represents Michigan's 10th Congressional District. He was the nominee for U.S. Senate in 2018 and 2020. And some interesting data that you have there. You go back, 2018, Debbie Stabenow comes within 6.5 points in a good year for Democrats. Remember, 2018 was a good year for Democrats. He comes within 6%, within 6 percentage points of defeating Debbie Stabenow. Fast forward to 2020, you have Gary Peters up for re-election. A still better year for Democrats than it was for Republicans. Democrats took control of the Senate. They expanded their margin of victory, I believe, in the House of Representatives. They flipped the presidency. And Gary Peters only wins by 1.5 points. John James comes within 1.7 percentage points of being the next senator from the state of Michigan. He comes within 90,000 votes. 90,000 votes. That's pretty good. Considering the fact that not that long ago, Gary Peters was elected by 13 percentage points in a year that was very good for Republicans. I mean, was insanely good. 2014 was a red wave year. This was the Tea Party. They came marching into Washington, D.C. We saw it. Go back, 2012, Debbie Stabenow. She won by 20 percentage points. 20 percentage points. Remember, also, this is a state that President Trump lost in 2020 to Biden by 3 points, but won it by roughly 1/4 point in 2016. This is a state where Republicans can be competitive now. And now that Tudor Dixon is not in this race, it reduces a lot of the conservative infighting. You know, she also recently criticized a lot of GOP candidates like John James, like Tom Leonard in the gubernatorial election. Because now we have John James, you have Tom Leonard, who's the former Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives, and the nominee for Attorney General in 2018. You also have Ark Nesbitt, who's the minority leader in the Michigan Senate since 2023. Now, reports say that Tudor Dixon does plan to stay active. Now, we know she does have a podcast where she promotes her conservative values and her Trump-aligned candidates via her podcast and different statewide travels. But ultimately, she's going to be staying on the sideline. She's going to stay in her commentator line or lane, not get into the actual politicking side of politics, I guess you could say. Now, on top of this huge news that Tudor Dixon will not be running in 2026 on the Senate side, on the gubernatorial side. The biggest news Republicans got of this cycle so far in the state of Michigan is that Representative John James, a two-term congressman from Michigan. Remember, he won some competitive races here. Michigan 10 won it 2024 by 6 percentage points. Go back, 2022 when he was initially elected, he wins by a half of a percentage point. Obviously, this was a year, this was redistricting, this was a new district that was formed. John James wins by a half of a percentage point. Fast forward 2024, expands his margin of victory by almost 5.5 percentage points here. Now, he is running to replace the two-term governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who is term limited later this year. Now, James, who is a military veteran and Michigan's first black Republican in Congress, is a proven vote getter in swing states. Like we said, narrowly wins his House seat in 2022. Less than 2,000 votes he wins by. He shows his ability to compete in tough races. Not only tough races in a district, but he also ran for Senate in 2018 and 2022, like we said, compete very well. Debbie Staber now comes within 6.5 points. Gary Peters comes within 1.5 points of unseated. An incumbent Democrat senator from the state of Michigan. Remember, Michigan, go back before the era of Trump. This was part of the blue wall. This is how Democrats ensured victory, was the blue wall right here. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Michigan was the bluest of all of these in 2012. It was the bluest. Look, Obama wins it by 16.5 points. Even in a good year for Republicans, they still win it by 3.5 points. In a year Bush wins by, Gore still won it by 5.5 points. But look, 2012, most recently, 9.5 percentage points. And look, with John James, he has a business background and he has, strong conservative values that resonate with Michigan's working class voters, especially in suburban and rural areas. That is the ability that John James has that some Republicans just don't have. The ability to appeal to the suburbs. You need that. You need to be able to appeal to the suburbs if you want to win. Gretchen Whitmer, she had to appeal to independents, to moderates, to conservatives, to people who voted for Donald Trump. She had to appeal to those same people if she wanted to win. She's winning re-election in this state by 10 percentage points in a good year for Republicans with a bad Republican nominee. And you can see clearly what a bad Republican nominee does to you. A bad Republican nominee puts the Democrats up 10 points in Michigan, puts the Democrats up 15 points in Pennsylvania, puts Democrats up 1.5 points in Arizona. But you can see what a good candidate does. In a historically blue state, it puts a Republican up 1.5 points. In a state that has shifted a lot to the left in the last 2 decades. Remember, Georgia, this is a state that voted for George Bush by 11 points the first time, 16 points the second time, and 5 points for McCain in 2008. Look, 2004, 16 points for George Bush. 16 points for George Bush. Now you can clearly see which direction reality has started to shift. You can see Brian Kemp wins by 7.5 points at the same time 2 years after Joe Biden wins the state of Georgia for the first time since 96? No, 92. The first time since 92 that Democrats won in Georgia. They win in 2020. 2 years later, Brian Kemp slides to victory with a 7.5 point margin of victory. But on this same ballot, you could see Raphael Warnock wins re-election in Georgia. So to be clear, this is what a bad Republican nominee will do to you. This is what a bad Republican nominee in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia will do to you. This is what will happen. This is what happens. But so this is exactly why Republicans need to nominate John James. They need to. Honestly, I wish he was on the Senate side because I think he'd play much better, because I think that matters so much more to have a senator, a Republican senator from the state of Michigan. If you're looking at the current makeup right now, if John James is on the Senate side, clearly this is a toss-up or a tilt Republican state. We already know that Democrats are probably going to pick up one of these two. They're either going to win Georgia or win North Carolina. This is tight, just even to hold the majority that they have right now. Let's say Republicans hold on to North Carolina, they don't hold on in Georgia with Jon Ossoff. Look, Michigan, that's a pickup. That's 54 seats right there. That's what Republicans need. But ultimately, he's running on the gubernatorial side. But like we said, he has much broader appeal. He has appeal outside of the Trump orbit, outside of the Trump electorate. And James's entry makes him an easy frontrunner for the GOP nomination on the governor's side, with the best shot Republicans have had to flip the governor's mansion in years. Now, his decision not to run for Senate leaves a lot of room for candidates like Mike Rogers, who narrowly lost to Alyssa Slotkin in 2024. Ultimately, I think it's going to be tougher. Look, 2024 was a good year for Republicans. Let's not try and pussyfoot around this. It was a good year for Republicans, and they still lost in Michigan. They still lost in Wisconsin. That's the reality that was staring us down. They still lost in Michigan. 26 is going to be a better year for Democrats. It's still a toss-up state. It is still very much a purpley state, no doubt about that. But it is going to be a better year for Democrats. Republicans need to broaden their appeal if they want to win. They do. They need to be. We cannot nominate someone who is the most loyal person to Donald Trump in a purple state. It's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. But we're going to see exactly what happens. And really the big news that we have here is that Tudor Dixon is not in the race. This will streamline both GOP primaries, letting candidates like John James focus on Democrats and not internal battles. And with John James on the gubernatorial side, this strengthens Republicans' chance in a state that backed Trump by less than 2 points in 2024. And his statewide experience and appeal to moderates and independents and disenfranchised Democrats make him the best Republican to compete against a Democrat in this, or the best Republican to compete against a Democrat in this race, against someone like Jocelyn Benson, Garland Gilchrist. These are big names. You have the Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, the Michigan Secretary of State right now. Obviously, we know Mallory McMerrill bowed out, Gary Peters bowed out, Pete Buttigieg bowed out of this. This is who they have right here, Democrats to go against. And look, they won decently in 2022. Like, we know they did pretty well in Michigan in 2022, obviously initially elected back in 2018. We can go to more of the statewide elections that we see here. But the reality is, for Democrats in this race here, it's simply that they're going to compete against the best Republican that they have. They are. They're going to compete against the best Republican in 2022, in 2026. That's just a reality that they're going to be looking at here. We look at the actual state results in Michigan. We'll see exactly how they perform. You can see Gretchen Whitmer wins 54% of the vote. Track other races that occurred. Let's see right here. Attorney General, they win 53%. Jocelyn Benson with 56% support in 2022. So obviously, she's doing even better than Gretchen Whitmer did. Even better than Whitmer did. Which is pretty intense. It is. So we're going to see exactly what happens in this race here. But John James' statewide experience and appeal to moderates makes him the best Republican, like we said, to compete against the Democrats in this race. They do. Now, another thing that is going to very much complicate the race is Mike Duggan. He is the very popular mayor of Detroit. Very, very popular. He was elected quite some years ago. I believe he's been there about a decade now. January of 2014, he was a former prosecutor of Wayne County. And let's see, he's the first white mayor of a majority black city since the early 1970s, when Detroit's population still had a white majority. Now, he was reelected in landslide margins in 2017 and in 2021. And as of 2020, he enjoyed approval ratings of much over 68%. Some of the highest approval ratings for any mayor in Detroit or any politician, period. He announced that he launched a independent bid for governor. He's going to run as governor. Now, he is a Democrat. He ran as a Democrat. He's probably going to pull more people from the Democrat Party, which could be good for Republicans. Like we said, although midterms historically favor the party out of power, for the same reason that if Elon Musk runs some candidates in competitive races, you could see him split the Republican, the conservative vote. The same thing is going to happen here with Mike Duggan. They could split the Democrat vote in the gubernatorial election, which could give Republicans an edge in 2026. This is the perfect storm that you're seeing happening. Now, it's not, I shouldn't say perfect, because it's there's not a Democrat in the White House, and it's their midterm. It is Donald Trump's midterm. It is going to be much more favorable for Democrats. But if you have Mike Duggan, who's split in the Democrat vote, pulling more moderates, and you have John James, who can hold together the conservative faction of Michigan, pull in 45%, 46%. Meanwhile, Duggan, and whoever the Democrat nominee is, maybe it's Benson, maybe it's Gilchrist, split the Democrat vote. Can you win that way? That is a way to win. But all in all, Tudor's Dixon decision not to run and John James's gubernatorial bid are game changers for Michigan Republicans in 2026. John James is the strongest Republican to lead the party statewide with unmatched name recognition, voter appeal, and electoral history. In the 2026 Senate elections and gubernatorial elections will test the GOP's ability to unite and capitalize on these ideals. So stay tuned for more updates as they come up. We will be here every step of the way. Any updates in the Senate race in Michigan, in the gubernatorial election in Michigan, we will be here to bring you an update. So as always, folks, drop down below, smash that subscribe button, hit that like button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.